Hi, I'm Victoria.
And I'm Maddie.
And we are the co-hosts of Pop Culture Breakdown, a podcast where we discuss topics in pop culture. Today, we'll be addressing stereotypes of women on reality TV and how this affects our perception of women. Also, we're going to discuss cultivation theory and feminism theory and how it impacts our views and our lives in general. So to start off, I kind of want to dive into cultivation theory and explain it a little bit in case the viewers don't understand what it is. So basically, cultivation theory is that the more people watch something, the more they're going to believe that it is real or possibly achievable in the present or the future. So for example, on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, these lavish lifestyles that they have, people could think that they are real and that is the norm for anyone in society. But in reality, it is over-dramatized because it is a TV show. So that's interesting. But basically, I think that also is fascinating because these stereotypes that people have of women, a lot of the time when we do see them on TV, people believe, oh, that is real for everyone. Oh, that is, just real. And I guess that sometimes it is real, but other times it is over-dramatized. So there's a fine line between what's real and what is fake.
And another thing that I think is, it's not that these stereotypes are all necessarily untrue, but they're just incomplete, and obviously in a show they're just hitting on certain aspects purposely for making the show entertaining. So I think a lot of times they just show these women acting crazy or purposely do things that make these women want to pick fights with each other, especially within The Bachelor or shows where they kind of just focus on women all hanging out in one room or something like that. And I think that's also damaging to just real life relationships in general, whether it's how women interact with each other or how they just interact even in a relationship, because people probably think that by like watching these shows and seeing women go crazy about a guy, that's actually going to happen, and that's how all women are going to be in a relationship. So it's really interesting because it affects not just women's interactions with each other, but also with men.
And the problem is that when you have a show like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, and they have one focus of finding this man, their only thought is on finding the man. They're not thinking about other things because they can't have their phone. They don't have any external factors. So the fact that they're only internally thinking about this one goal, and that's what all their thoughts have come down to, that does make them a little bit, not crazy per se, but obsessed with this single goal of finding the right guy. So I think that kind of sometimes gets skewed in the media or skewed in these relationships also, because people aren't realizing that the women don't have other things to think about in the moment, because that is the one thing that they're presented with, and the producers and the whole purpose of the show is to focus on that, like, simply.
Yeah, and they're not giving them anything else to talk about, so that's all that they're going to talk about, and then that's going to assume to society and the viewers who watch it that is all women care about, is a man or just fighting, because it's not giving them anything else.
And another thing is that, like, tying in with the woman being crazy or obsessive, or the obsessed with the man, along with there's a stereotype of women being mean on reality TV shows, but oftentimes, like, especially in The Bachelor, like, they are being mean or perhaps catty is because they want the guy. They don't want other girls getting the guy, and I feel like oftentimes maybe they do try to have friendships, but these friendships are broken apart or not complete because they are all fighting for the same goal. So I feel like that's something that goes back and forth also, because yes, while the women can seem catty or they can seem a little bit mean, it's hard for them to have friendships with people that are fighting for the same thing that they are fighting for. So I feel like that's also difficult and something that gets, like, skewed within the show and the purpose of the show.
Right, and I found actually an article about two girls that were on The Bachelor a couple years ago, so Kelsey and Ashley from The Bachelor, and the article's talking about how calling them crazy is unnecessary and destructive, and actually she said that they purposely do things that will make girls, like, fueled up and, like, ready to cry, so then they can make sure that they film those actually, like, those moments while they're happening, and kind of just basically put them in a situation, but they don't kind of give the background of anything. So it just makes them look like extremely emotional while crying for no reason, when actually they did something to kind of, like, start start them crying.
And that's interesting because that just goes off the notion of something we discussed in a paper, was that while it is called reality TV, it is not portraying reality. It is portraying either the best or worst parts of someone's life, and that is ultimately false or hard
Well,
to...
and it's like not even like, it's not even their life. Like, as we know, probably for the most part, these aren't real things that are this. They're just not real. Like, they're not real lives, and they just pick certain parts, obviously, like I said, with no background. So it's not even like what they're even doing. Like, just the concepts of reality shows, especially like The Bachelor too. Like, that's not like a real life situation. Like,
Totally.
it's not right for 20 girls to all be going after one guy. And like, also at the same time, like, we know that for the most part, like, the ending like never actually works out. Like, these people can't get to know each other within these shows. It doesn't even like depict like how real life even works, which is interesting that it's called reality also.
Totally, and they're focusing single hand on these heightened situations, these over dramatic situations. And like in a specific article I was looking into, a Forbes article, the author describes he basically emphasized that the girl fight is now an expectation on some reality shows, and this was discussed in the article, What Reality TV is Doing to Women. And I think that's really interesting to think about, because the fact that it's an expectation, it doesn't leave room for people to question or wonder. It only allows them to focus on this one thing, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And because it is reality TV, people are looking for the drama in these situations because that's what they're ultimately watching for. And while that is sad, it's becoming true. Because why do people watch shows like The Real Housewives or The Kardashians, like The Bachelor, how we've kind of been focusing on? They want to see the drama. They want to see the crazy situations. They want to see the scandals, the boy problems. That's what's mainly being focused on. And I think that's what's also interesting about reality TV is, why are we so drawn to that? Like, what is so important? What makes us want to watch that? And truly, I think it is because of these altered states, these situations that aren't real or that are heightened to the max, that make us question and wonder, because it's not our lives. So because it's other people's, we think that it's acceptable or that it may be funny. So I don't know. Yeah, I think that's interesting as well.
And also, I know that, like, I am definitely a fan of, like, the Real Housewives series, and, like, especially, like, Real Housewives of New York. I don't know if you watch it, but there's this one character, and she's, like, every episode, she just does something, like, crazy, and it's just, like, each season, she just gets crazier and crazier, and, like, to me, that's, like, entertaining. Like, just, like, oh, what is she gonna do this episode? Like, she's crazy. Like, to me, it's, like, funny and entertaining, which is, like, kind of wrong in a way, I guess, is that we're basing our entertainment off of these, like, probably, like, terrible situations that these women are going through on these shows. Like, they, like, purposely will, like, bring up bad parts of, like, each other's pasts, and that will, like, be the focus of a whole show. And, like, I just find that interesting that that's entertainment to us. It's like watching these women, like, fight or cry about something. It's just, I don't know. It's just
totally
weird.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I think it's weird too. And then that in turn does affect our perception of women in general. And I think that's something that we've been talking about a lot and focusing on, because are these accurate perceptions? No, not necessarily, because it is something that is often heightened or made up. So I feel like that really questions, like, how much are we taking of, like, this information that we are taking seriously, that we think is true, that we think is false. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Well, and another thing that, like, I feel like, I know, like, with the Real Housewives series is, like, all of them, like, end up getting divorced, and, like, obviously, like, they're all really wealthy people, and it kind of, like, now that I'm thinking about it, has kind of, like, put into my mind that, like, these, like, people who have all these money, like, their relationships, like, don't work out, which probably isn't even the reason. Like, it's not because of their money, it's because of other issues. But also, I feel like, just makes you think that, oh, like, if you're of status or something, like, your relationship isn't gonna last. And then they, like, emphasize, like, having these young boyfriends, which obviously they're just showing us 5 women's different lives, and it's not probably, and I just now, like, assume, like, oh, like, every wealthy woman in, like, New York or Los Angeles is, like, dating some young guy who, like, they didn't have a marriage that worked. I feel like they just also just like play on that factor.
Yeah. And then these people's relationships most of the time end up failing, which is like, I don't know. That's something we look at and we're like, oh, well, are our relationships going to fail if we
Yeah, and
have
even like
relationships similar to that? I don't know.
for The Bachelor too, it's like there's the whole concept of The Bachelor, and like people are like obsessed with like all these women going after one guy, which like also can like, we talk about that for a second, just like even with The Bachelorette too, is just like all these people pining after one person.
Yeah, like how is that doing? How does that? What am I trying to say here? How does that affect a woman's self-worth? How does that affect their perception of themselves? And I feel like that's something, like, yes, we're focusing on also how others are perceiving these women, but how is this making the woman? How is it making them perceive themselves? And I feel like that's something that people don't always think about, but this is affecting their self-worth. They're seeing this on TV. They're seeing this portrayal of themselves and them sometimes reacting in ways that maybe are uncharacteristic to how they are in real life, but they're being put in these situations. So I think it's definitely interesting and important to compare, yes, how others perceive these women, but also how the women are perceiving themselves and their own self-worth, because that plays into a big, role or importance into the future.
Yeah, and like even like women who like are on these reality shows, I feel like when a lot of them end up like going off the show or whatever, it's because of like it just like ruined their minds and the way that they felt about themselves. And like the article that I was talking about earlier, it says the environment of The Bachelor is crazy, not the women. And I feel like that kind of just goes along with all of the different reality shows, is they put these women in these crazy environment, which like does harm to just how they feel about themselves as well. And then going off of that, how like the young girls who idolize these women feel about themselves as well. And especially with so many of the shows like focusing on like men and just how men are like the center of these people's lives, is I feel like affects just how young girls, or even, you know, like older women who are watching it, like just think that like getting a man or like having a man choose you is like the definition of your self-worth, or like what.
True, yeah. And I feel like it's all a chain reaction too. Like it all really connects when you think about it. Like how women are viewed on reality TV affects how society views them in general. So I feel like you could connect all these parts together, and it's like we need to be having better portrayals on TV. Some people are viewing women in a better light, in better ways. And obviously not dismissing the bad behavior, the circumstances that definitely some are true and some are accurate, but also just seeing women in not only one specific light in these specific made up or over dramatized situations, but looking at it collectively as a whole, and understanding that there's many sides to a story, and that we can't just take these situations and have that be our complete view. We need to see many aspects of TV, many different portrayal of women in the media, in newspapers and movies and TV shows and real life, just looking at them as a whole and being able to understand.
Yeah, and I feel like how we were saying about explaining like feminism theory and everything like that, because of feminism theory, we know that this isn't real. Like as women also, like we know that what they're showing isn't real, but like also like you, like it makes you think of like all of the areas where like in the world where women aren't don't really have like a lot of say, and then like you wonder if young girls are watching that in an area where already like the women kind of like aren't worth anything, and like kind of what that does to them.
Yeah, like what ideals do they have in their head now about the woman they could be or the woman around them. Yeah, and I feel like that's why it's important that we need a better view of women, a better perception as a whole, because this is affecting younger girls, older generations, truly anyone, men or women, whether it's themselves or whether it's other people, both genders. But yeah, I feel like it's important to understand the whole story.
Yeah. It also shows how, like, women can't be friends with each other. Like, just how it just really makes women seem like they don't care about anything but themselves. And like we were saying, like, so people who this is like what they're basing, they think like reality is, or especially like people like who aren't from like the US and everything, and like in so many of our reality TV shows like the Kardashians, like people all over the world watch that. So it's like, what is that also just doing like on the way that people view us?
True. And like, what reality shows do you watch? Like, for example, the ones I guess we've been talking about.
Yeah,
I watch
I
those a
actually
lot.
don't watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
And
ever.
why don't you watch it?
I guess just like the concept of it, like I just don't know. Like, I don't know. I just don't get, like, in my opinion, like I feel like having like 20 people going after the same person and like one person only getting to, you know, go on like certain dates or whatever, like that just like, I like know that's not real. Like that's not
real and like not healthy. Like
right.
The concept, it's like people. The concept is just so like baffling when you think about it. It's like, I watch The Real Housewives a lot, and Bachelor, Bachelorette, I'm very on off about. Used to watch it a lot with my mom. My mom absolutely loves the show. And I always ask her why she likes it, and she's like, the drama, which, of course, like,
Yeah.
like how many people watch it. But I'm always very like, I don't know, I'm on and off about it because, again, like what you said, like I just think it's so fake and like everything is staged to a certain point. Also,
Yeah.
so many things are staged about it that I just feel like it's like.
It's like so
Crazy.
like we get like obviously like, you know, like TV shows, like fictional TV shows like aren't real, and like we know that and we find that entertaining. And then it's interesting that these things that are like meant to portray reality, you know, but like still are fake, but that people still like just still become so obsessed with them, even though like we know that like probably all of that drama like isn't real. So,
Yeah, totally. And I feel like that also ties back to things that we were learning in our class, in our pop culture class, because pop culture is entertaining, and just focusing on like why is pop culture, why is reality TV so interesting and fascinating to people, like what lures people in, but like it's truly the entertainment side of it, whether it's like bad entertainment or good entertainment, and whether it's positive or negative on our views, but just the fact that it's entertaining like draws people in.
Well, yeah, and then like also like look at people who've like made their lives, like the Kardashians, like off of a reality TV show. Like that's also like an interesting concept, is that people became so fascinated on just like watching like their daily lives that now they're these like famous people just because people enjoy watching them. I don't even...
Yeah, right. Like enjoy watching them like fail or succeed.
Yeah,
like
right.
do well in these different businesses and endeavors, or truly like have these relationship problems, or just other issues that they talk about on the show, which is like, wow, do we like that so much because it's not happening to us and because it's happening to someone else?
Well, it's like, I don't know, now like it's just like sad to think that so much of like our culture is like just obsessed with other people.
That's so true. And that is interesting also to think about, because that statement is accurate. Like we are so obsessed with what everyone else is doing, whether it's like on TV shows or like apps, like Instagram, like this, like that. And like that's not healthy when you think about it. Like, why are we so obsessed with stuff like that?
Because like, I mean, like it's interesting. I feel like we know, especially after like taking classes like our pop culture class and just like other like gender studies classes, like we know like all of these things like aren't real, and I feel like we're kind of like in the minority when we are like the ones who are educated on all of these like different situations, and there's so many people out there that like just are like obsessed with it and like don't actually know, just like
No, I feel like that's definitely accurate. It's like we can look in with this magnifying glass of knowledge because we have all of these terms now in our book, and now we have such a greater understanding of these theories and these topics, and can have a more neutral and like collective view on this. But that's true, some people don't, and I feel like that's why there is such a like discrepancy or like confusion on a lot of these topics because we all have a different like understanding of them. Like some people not being informed enough, some people being informed a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people don't even know like what feminism is, so they don't understand like how these shows and like even like Instagram and stuff like that, like how that's harmful, because people just like don't understand like about the inequalities of people, and that these things are just like reiterating these like already wrong ways that people believe people are.
True. I agree. I feel like something that's also interesting to note is the fact that a lot of reality TV shows are primarily about women. There are definitely some that are about men and some that involve men and women for sure, but I think even like just analyzing the Real Housewives and how it is housewives, it's not about men, just about women, and why isn't there one about men, and why is the draw to the woman and to the cattiness and to these particular situations and not about their husbands, while the husbands are involved? Yeah, particularly a little bit, but why is the main premise about women and what draws that to people?
Yeah, and I feel like even with like the shows, like the reality shows that I watch, like I can't think to name like any of the guys that are on the show. Like I know like yeah, their husbands are on that. I don't know what their husbands' names are. All I know is like, oh, they probably make a lot of money, you know? Like, so like when like the guys are in the show, it's like, oh, like they're shown as like the breadwinner even. Like they don't really have like, they don't show their personality or anything. Like it's just like, oh, there's the guy, he makes a ton of money, and then here now let's talk about all the women and all of the things she spends the money on or something.
Yeah. And even like in the Real Housewives, we know a lot of them do a lot of their own work. They have a lot of their own businesses, but it's like the men like aren't shown too much, and like it's like almost like they're this far away figure that's like above them or like above everyone else. Which that's like interesting. I don't know, I guess that's something that I just sometimes think of with that, because it's like, yes, we know like some of them are divorced, they're all of their situations are very different, but like yeah, I guess I just get that image of like there's this like far away figure that is almost like above it all, or they don't want to be included, or
yeah, that's like another thing is like I wonder if like the men don't want to be included in like the shows, or even when you think about like the shows that they like have their kids on, it's always like showing the mom and the kids still, like, you know, so it kind of just even like re-emphasizes like other stereotypes of women that like still like even with all of this money she's like the one that's like taking care of the kid, and like still like husband's nowhere to be found, just talks about, you know, his work or isn't even there.
True. And that's another thing that it's like, what is that saying about woman? How is that portraying woman? How does that affect our perception of woman? All questions that like connect together. It's like, how do others perceive women, and then how does that align with what are our values? Like, what are our views?
Yeah, and another like thing that's like interesting is I know that like people like really talk about like how like people, especially like women in reality shows, like except like the specific ones that I know like we've talked about before, but like they are like attractive people, which is also like another interesting thing to note, is that like they're focusing so much of like the show like on these women's looks, which kind of also then just once again like affects like perception of society, is that like women like need to look a certain way.
Yeah, and it's like that's not showing their personality traits, it's only showing the exterior. And like when it comes down to it, like these stereotypes that we've discussed, like women being seen as crazy or mean, catty, or only attractive, like why is it those, and why is it not woman being showed as nice, woman being showed as ABC? Like, why do you think that?
I think because like people wouldn't find that entertaining. Like,
and isn't that so sad? Like that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is like the entertainment purpose.
Which like it's just not even like what we know, it's not even real. And so it's still just interesting that like all of these shows that are so inaccurate are still doing so well.
No, that's very true. Because think about it, like truly the 3 shows that we've been talking about, Keeping Up the Kardashians, the Real Housewives, and Bachelor, they've been on for years.
Yeah.
Like, all of them. The Kardashians, they're now going, I don't know what the accurate season it would be, but they have had so many seasons, all of them, and people, it's like, with these shows, they have, like, a solid fan base for all of them, you know? It's like, you have those friends that watch The Bachelor every week, that are tuning into the Kardashians, their Twitter, their Instagram, this, and it's like, it just goes to show that, like reality TV and, like, this side, and, like, often this, like, negative side, like, it gets views, like, it gets people hyped, like, it has a fan base, which it's like, will that ever change? I think that's something to also think about in the future, like, will this change, or, like, will this continue, like, throughout the future of, like, maybe these, like, negative portrayals, negative, just all the things that go along with what we've been talking about, like, will they continue, or, like, will they be changed with, better information or stuff like that.
That's what, like, another thing that's interesting to me is I feel that, like, our generation is, like, more, like, proactive when it comes to, like, fighting for equality and stuff, but yet, like, still viewers of these shows are, like, young people who would maybe, like, identify as a feminist, but yet they're still, like, encouraging these stereotypes of women that are hurtful in, like, general to society. Yeah, they're identifying, you know, as fighting for equality, but then giving ratings and views and money to these industries that are just reinforcing reasons why people aren't treated equal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's like oftentimes with stuff, like, people will say one thing but then do another. You know, it's like people's words aren't often correlating with their actions. I feel like that's something.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said, like, it's entertaining to, like, watch these people fight and argue and just be crazy and all be obsessed with the same person. It's, like, entertaining to us.
And I agree with that 100%. And at the end of the day, I think that something that's important is just being aware. And oftentimes, yes, things could change, or yes, things could keep going the way that they're going, but people being more informed and aware, I think, is important. People being informed of the whole side of the story and not just what they're seeing on reality TV or this, and keeping up with news, keeping up with what's going on as a whole, I feel like is very important to people having not just particular views, but, you know, having collective views, knowing, like, having knowledge on different areas and being able to sort through how they feel about it. And
yeah, and I feel like that's, like, another thing is that what's, like, really important, like, especially, like, in regards to, like, shows and things like this, is that, like, people, like, we know that we're seeing, like, only part of the story and everything, and, like, only part of someone's life, and it kind of just, like, emphasizes, I guess, the fact that, like you said, like, or people need to know more. They need to, like, be more informed, more aware, and I feel like just kind of, like, not, like, the first, like, step is maybe, like, acknowledging that these shows, just even, like, the environment that they put these women in, like, that's wrong.
Yeah. No, 100%, I agree. And just, like, acknowledging that, like, yes, some of what we're seeing, some could be some of their true characteristics, but not to the extent in which the show is allowing it to be, or, just the fact of reality TV is letting it be. So I think, a main point would definitely be that we're not dismissing these characters' actions or what, like, as a whole, because sometimes for sure it is true, and for sure they could be being mean. It's not all inaccurate, but just knowing the full story and knowing that bits and pieces, some is accurate and some is not, and being able to sort through that with knowledge is important, and I think should be important in the future of viewers of these shows, or just in general in the media.
Yeah, and now that, like, reminds me of, I watch, I forgot what it's called, like, the Kristen Cavallari show or whatever.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, and she was in, like, The Hills or something, I think. But I was, like, watching an interview with her from, like, recently, and it was, like, more about her new show. But it was just, like, saying, there was, like, so many episodes of The Hills, like, based on her dating this one guy, and, like, she didn't even know that they were saying she was dating him, like, and she wasn't. So that's, like, another interesting thing, is that, like, these women don't even know what is being said about them. It's just all made up, basically. So it's like, how can you base your perception on people based on something that we've confirmed is just not real? Well, another thing that I find interesting after just like our whole conversation today about reality shows is that even like the reality shows like where they do have men on it, it's like people just don't care about the guys still. Like when you think of like The Bachelor and like The Bachelorette, it's people are making like all of the women going after this one guy, like, oh, the women are crazy, they're desperate, they're obsessed with finding love, that's all they care about. And then it's like, do people say the same thing about The Bachelorette? Like, do they say like,
it's like the double standard thing,
and
you
like,
know?
yeah, and even for like the girl, there's like one single girl in The Bachelorette like looking for love, they still like put it on her like, oh, she's so desperate, like obsessed with finding a guy. Like, okay, what about all these 20 guys that are like looking for her? Like, it's a double standard. And it's like, either way they skew it, it's like always still like emphasized and just like focuses on the woman.
Yeah. And it's like, even you see like beyond reality TV and movies, TV shows, anything really in general, it's like, oh, guys are congratulated, or like other guys hyping guys up, like, yeah, you got the girl, like, yeah, you're doing this, blah blah. But then it's like girls are looked at as like, okay, like the whole slut shaming thing, or just like topics like that are just so unacceptable, that are so widely known. And it's crazy to think that that's like, yeah, I don't know, it's just crazy. I feel like I see that in a lot of movies, like guys being congratulated and hyped up for things that then it's like role reversal, and then girls are doing similar things but they're looked down upon, and it's like, oh, ashamed. But that's not accurate.
And like, even I'm not like, I don't know, like I don't really watch The Bachelor, but like what about like the one guy who like, he was the one who like was with the one girl and then like left for the other? Like, people aren't like, I know people are saying like, oh yeah, he sucks and like he was an awful guy, but like it's still like, imagine like when like, oh, I'm pretty sure like there has been an episode of The Bachelorette where she's like hurt a guy and they like put it on her like, oh my god, she's like an awful woman, like she's evil. But like people like aren't taking the guy who left the one girl, whatever happened with that, like they're not saying the same thing about him. Even what he did was equal or worse, I don't know, but it's still like, I don't know, they just don't seem to care as much.
Yeah. And it's like interesting to see how like a lot of these things we're noticing are like continuous patterns of things that are occurring. So it's like not something that's like noticed and then, oh, maybe it's changed, but instead it's patterns, things that happen in every season of these episodes, or perhaps in like movies, sequels, things that are just always continuous and growing, which that's adding fuel to the fire. That's making the problem even worse, because it's just re-emphasizing the fact to people like, oh yeah, this stuff is okay, yeah, this is normal, yeah, this is acceptable, instead of switching it up or realizing the problem and making a difference.
Yeah, that's like an interesting point too, that like you said, like, oh yeah, people see this and they're like, oh, this is normal.
Like, why? And even that, like, just something being normal, like, why are things norms? Like, why is that a norm? Why is this normal? Oh, because it's been repeated, because it's been shown to us so many times. Like, isn't that so interesting? Like, how did any of this even all start? Is like my question that I always just like wonder, like, how did we get these opinions and these values and these norms ingrained in our head or in society? Like, was it us? Is it us watching other people? Is it us from our parents? It's interesting.
Yeah, I guess like that's like another interesting point to make is like, so like we've stated, like we understand that like these things aren't normal and they're like not right and people shouldn't, view people like that, but now it's kind of like, what should we do about it?
No, that's accurate. And again, going back to like what we've discussed, it is making people aware, making people informed, making people want to make a difference. I feel like in many aspects of the world is often hard because, sometimes people are stuck in what they've always believed, or what they see in society. But I think that that's a big thing that we've learned and that we've come to talk about a lot today is that we need to understand, A, where are we getting these views from and these values from, and B, like, how are our views and values affecting these perceptions? Like, how does everything all tie and correlate together? I feel like is a major thing. It's like we see something on TV, then we perceive it one way, and like,
it just keeps and like
going and going.
I know reality TV has been around for a while, and it's like, I think when like reality TV came to become like such a thing, it's women's roles in societies weren't as like progressive as they are now. So I feel like that's like also just something interesting. It's like, so like when reality TV like started, and when shows like, you know, like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette like started, it was just like a different time. Yet they're just continuing to like emphasize these like same values and these same like stereotypes, and it's kind of like interesting just to like note that like women are becoming more prominent in society, and it's just, I just wonder at what point like will people be like just realize like how just false it is, and then it will just, I don't know, the term reality TV will go away or something. I don't know.
Totally. And I feel like that's a big point as to why we have this podcast and why it's called Pop Culture Breakdown, because we do want to focus on different topics in pop culture, and talking about it makes people more aware. And I know we've used that word aware a lot, but I feel like it is very imperative to future change, is being aware. And yeah, I think that it's fascinating to see all of this, but then interpret it into what we think is right, think is wrong. Obviously everyone has a different interpretation, a different view of what's right and wrong, but I think that it's important to discuss these topics because they are relevant and they will always be relevant.
Well, it also like kind of just goes to show like how obsessed, like we know like from classes that we've taken and everything, just like how obsessed people are like with pop culture and like with media and everything that's going on with that, and like how much people just base things off of like what they see and like what pop culture is. So I feel like that's why it's so important to open up this conversation, and kind of just explain how these shows aren't feminist.
Totally. So basically the purpose of Pop Culture Breakdown obviously is to make people be a little bit more mindful of their actions, maybe what's coming out of their mouth, maybe what they choose to watch, and we definitely want to focus each podcast of different sectors of pop culture, what is the most relevant, what's going on in the media, but we believe that today's topic is really imperative and will be interesting to see how it evolves over time. How will stereotypes of women on reality TV change or maybe stay the same, and how will our perception of women do the same? Will it stay the same or will it change? And I think that it's just important to realize that while things are evolving over time, sometimes they're often staying the same more than maybe we want them to. So I think that always like getting the word out there about these pressing topics is important in helping people.
Yeah, and I also proactive. I was just gonna say that like it's so important to open up these conversations about these topics that are so controversial and that people are aware of, but maybe just kind of don't know how to go about, you know, discussing. So especially just how we've been saying this whole episode of how these, you know, portrayals are just so inaccurate, and that we have to look to society to change how they view these things and how they perceive things, and everything really does just play off of each other. As we know, you know, pop culture is just a huge part of people's lives today. So with the things that we're seeing all the time, we really need to understand and recognize that there's, you know, these issues of inequality on, you know, shows like reality TV, the different shows that we mentioned today. Like, just really understand all of that, those different inequalities, these different relationships, you know, and how they definitely affect one another, because TV and media in pop culture in general. Everything is interrelated.
No, totally. And we do thank you guys so much for tuning in to our podcast. We definitely believe every viewer will help raise awareness and help make change in the future of reality TV and in general. Just topics in pop culture and letting people have a voice and letting different people share like their thoughts on it is important also. And we love hearing others' views as well.
Yeah, I think that's, we really want to just understand and let other people just kind of, like we said, to make change, we really just need to open up a conversation.
Definitely. And once again, thank you very much for tuning into our podcast, Pop Culture Breakdown. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. And